What's going on, y'all? Bud Elliott here of the Nolecast. That's Chuck Blunt. And to be honest, we weren't going to do an instant reaction to that debacle that was the Stanford game. Hold on. I got to put my phone on Do Not Disturb, but also, there are certain people by whom I do want to be disturbed while we record this. So let's timestamp this. We are recording starting at 8:40 or so. Sorry. Mike Norvell has not been fired as of 8:40. I would be surprised. This is a think, not an I know. As of 8:40, I'd be surprised if he coaches any more games in Tallahassee. Surprised. Does not mean shocked, right? Anything can happen in theory, I guess. Although I would be pretty surprised if he's coaching any more games in Tallahassee.
Especially with a bye next week, right? Like if you're going to do it, this is the time you do it so that you can get some of those things like the logistics, having an interim in place. So if it's going to happen, it would happen probably in the next 12 to 36 hours, right?
I mean, look, the lifespan on this show, I'm trying to make this show a little bit more future-proof. So I don't the mechanics of this basically are this, okay? Team didn't meet today because they flew back super late from the West Coast game. That's pretty standard, especially if you have the bye week after. They had a pre-scheduled team meeting already for 7:30 in the morning. They also move in to the football-only facility this week. So all the offices are actually literally boxed up if you want to go with some symbolism there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Florida, the way they did it today, they had the assistants in at 1, told the players at 2, right? That's kind of how it tends to work. This may be a 12-hour podcast. By the time I put this in the system, it'll be 9:30 Eastern time PM. But we are going to future-proof this. So if he's already been fired by the time you listen to this, I think Chuck and I will get us some good conversation tonight about what you're looking for in a coach, how we have to adapt to the changing landscape of college football, all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think optically it'd be pretty bad to have Mike Norvell at the ribbon cutting ceremony and all that stuff for the football only facility. Do you agree?
I totally agree. I think you saw some things, interactions between players and coaches last night that just kind of scream that this isn't going to work anymore. Typically he pulls the team together before halftime and gives them a pep talk before they go to the locker room, and they seem to kind of abandon that last night. It didn't really happen. There was that very uncomfortable back and forth between him and Edwin Joseph early in the game when he was offsides on the field goal that ultimately led to a touchdown. It just looks like it's falling apart. And I think everybody can see it. This isn't us trying to read into things. I think everybody kind of can see the writing on the wall, and it's a matter of when, not if, this next step is going to be taken.
I would agree with you on that. All right. Buyouts in the mid-50s. Obviously, you got to pay to buy out some of the assistants as well. It's payable in installments through 2031. My suspicion, strongly held suspicion, is that they're basically passing the hat, not for the full buyout number. You don't need to get the full buyout number pledged. You probably need to get about 18 months to 2 years of it pledged. And then the rest of it is kind of a line item in the budget. I would project, even with this crappy season that you're having, that FSU is going to make, in the double-digit millions of extra money from the ACC this year,
which will help
by the increased rev share off the ratings. So, now it sucks to have to spend all that towards buyout again, but that's just kind of the business that you're in. All right, so let's kind of forward flip this thing. I don't really care who the interim is. Maybe it'd be Gus. I don't know if Gus even wants to do that. Right? That maybe
there's a lot of rumblings that would suggest he probably doesn't. So I'm going to lean that he probably isn't the interim, even though he has the most head coaching experience on the staff.
I mean, could Odell do it again? Sure.
Yeah. It's possible.
Yeah, possible. Right. You're not going to fire the entire staff, right? Mm-hmm. That doesn't work. You don't get a new staff mid-year. Maybe an assistant or something goes depending on whatever, but ultimately, Mike's lost the team. And he's not getting them back at this point. I don't think there's many more people willing to throw good money after bad here.
That was a pretty rough post-game presser, and he straight up opened it, admitting that he didn't have them properly prepared. And I think that's self-evident. It's self-evident to all of us. They opened the game with a goddamn delay a game. How do you You have a script all week. You know what your first play is, and you still get a delay game. That's just poor coaching across the board. But he looked like a guy who knew his days were numbered.
Agreed. All right, so do need to thank some sponsors here. Obviously, Chad at the Legendary Team, the awesome job. 600 plus loans now. Maybe we're to 700. I don't know. Through the Nolecast loan program, 844 FSU loan is the number to call there as well. Of course, Congruity HR Solutions. Congruity does a tremendous job. All their contact info certainly in the show notes. If you own a business, small, medium, even a large business, they can accommodate you with HR, payroll needs, HR management, medical insurance, whatever you guys need. They can certainly help you out. And just in case we get rolling this when we don't, I don't want to forget, or hell, if this breaks actually while we're doing this, which I don't think it's going to tonight, to be honest, but I guess in theory it could, although I doubt it. Obviously, Madison Social Township. I know, Thompson's been just sick to himself all day. Thank God they had the good games early in the season so that they could actually make some money, man. Because if you were a bar owner and like your good games were the back half of the season, that is rough.
Who knew only having one home game in November would turn out to be a good thing for the city of Tallahassee?
Man, you're telling me. Okay, so yeah, I think it's become untenable. I do think like hanging the losses on Mike for next year made some sense, to be honest. I don't disagree with that logic, but not when you're losing to Stanford. Like that's where you kind of got to draw the line. I hope Tommy's okay. I haven't even asked about that, to be honest.
That was really nasty. Things. That was unfortunate.
Yeah, I'm not gonna get it. This is a sidetrack. We probably need to like change how we call the sliding rule. You know what I'm saying? Like a real, I don't know, like it needs to be like a true give up type thing. But like that, to me, that was still late. Like that's yeah, like you did not have to do that. All right. I've been thinking about this, and for all the negative around this program, there's still a lot of positive.
Mm-hmm.
You got the facility done. Okay. You got the stadium done. Unless something's changed, the program is not in Minnesota. It's the F in FSU still stands for Florida, in which there's a lot of talent in this state. Still a whole lot of guys going to the NFL draft. I mean, is it as talented as it once was? I don't think so, because a lot of your like high school coaches in Florida are leaving for better jobs in Georgia and South Carolina and Alabama that just pay more. It's still a program that, like, legitimately here, I think Florida State's rev share number for football is the highest in the country, or if it's not, it's got to be within like 500,000. Because I have no idea how anybody could have more rev share of just the rev share, not the NIL,
right, for
football than what FSU has. And that means you're outspending a majority of your schedule in a given year. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you're outspending them. You certainly spend on coaches. You're in an area where you should be able to shop for pretty good groceries. This is still a very attractive job to people.
Yeah, it's not a top 10 job, but it's at least a top 20 job. It's in that. I look at it more in tiers, right? I think there's like 3 programs that you have tier 1. Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State are probably your tier 1. You might throw Texas or Oregon in there just because of the money they have backing them. But then you have your tier 2, which are some of those historic blue bloods. And then I think you have the FSUs, the Miamis, the Floridas, a lot of these other, like they're tier 3, but it's still a top 20 job given. I mean, Cameron broke it down the other day this is a program that is top 15 in their NIL budget. This is top 15 or top 10 in what they commit to staff salary pool. This is top 10 in what they pay their head coach. Then you add in the access it has to talent in the whole state of Florida, South Georgia, into Alabama, Mississippi, maybe even you can tap into some Louisiana here and there, or up into the Carolinas. Like, you can't ask for a better footprint when it comes to where you get to recruit, but you have to put in the effort to get those kids to come here. And I think that's what's just been lacking for the last 6 years. And we beat that horse to death. But one more time, let's just point it out. It's all about establishing relationships and living and breathing recruiting. And that's where we need to look for the next head coach and who his staff is. Much like when Jimbo took over in 2010, he loaded up on a bunch of recruiters because he knew
Right.
he had to flip the roster. Because when he walked in, he said only one guy on that offense could play for him at LSU, Preston Parker.
Yeah.
3 years later, that roster started to look a lot different. 3 years after that, he won a national championship. That's what it takes if you want to compete at the highest level, is establish relationships and bring in those type of kids.
And if the guy you bring in is not an elite recruiter, he does have to like really get it, right, and understand what that operation looks like. Which is, I want to just kind of frame everything in this. Florida State may be one of the last like big buyout contracts signed. I do think there's probably now like Signetti at Indiana is maybe a little bit different, but I think some of these big time programs need to kind of nut up here and say, hey, if you're going to leave Florida State, especially now that we have the ACC deal done and you're making real money now in this league and there's not that impetus to leave quite as fast as maybe there was before, go ahead, leave. Like, it's a program. If the Dodgers lose their head coach, or the Astros lose their head coach, or like, give me a good NFL team that's not like that doesn't have Mahomes, right? Or now that players are paid, we need to start thinking about things in terms of this is a player-based operation. There's nobody in the NFL or pro baseball or even pro basketball where you're like, oh, now that we got that coach, we're going to go win the title. Right. It just doesn't happen like that, man. Yep. It's about players. Andy Reid doesn't make 7x what Patrick Mahomes makes. Right. Mahomes makes like 7x what Andy Reid makes. And so there's no reason, now that we've seen the actual rev share operation come through, now that we see how the portal works, now that we see how NIL works, now that we see how a lot of this clearinghouse stuff is not enforced, there's no reason to be signing an 8-year contract or a 9-year
How do you get
contract.
that? How do you put that cap back in the bag, I guess, is kind of the question, because I keep hearing this brought up and I think it makes total sense because of what we see at the professional level, but I don't know how, given one agent and or his organization controls so many of these big head coaches, how do you get Sexton to agree, man, we're only giving you a 4-year deal, or you need to take less money if you expect us to and be able to invest in the roster. Like it's an interesting conversation to have, because inevitably every major team that expects to compete for titles has to have this conversation. You have to stop paying $14 million for coaches and pay $7 million or $5.5 million so that you have those dollars left over. But I don't know how you get there without somebody going rogue and spending 10 or 12 million again on a coach to poach them. Like, Florida State was silly enough to only pay $7 million for this guy, but we can get him for 10. Like, I just don't know. It's a hard equation to solve because there's so many moving parts.
I mean, look, it's the same in hiring in almost any other industry. Okay. If you have other advantages in your job, it maybe somebody like Chuck, you got state tax in Ohio?
We do.
All right. Most people would rather live in Florida than the Midwest, because I see a lot of y'all retire down here, man. Okay. A lot of people would take less money to live in Florida if the job is more secure, which it is. Florida State's had 5 head coaches in the last 40 years? Okay. Not a lot of programs can say that. Now, you could say a lot of that was Bowden, but Jimbo was also there for a decade, right? Or about. You have really nice recruiting resources. You have great facilities now. It's location. You have a very winnable schedule year in and year out, especially if you're out spending and out airing the people who you play. And I think the way you do it is basically you don't allow the AD to make the hire. Okay, definitely not. For some reasons that I really want to get into on the show right now, but like I would bet you this is like a search committee type thing and not just a hand waving lip service search. I bet you it's actually like a real committee type thing. And you say, hey, okay, like we think this is like a top 15 type job right now, roughly. Okay. If you're not paying as much, it doesn't drop to like a top 50 job.
Right.
Maybe it makes you like a top 25 type job at the moment, especially, given your NIL and rev share commitments. So you look at this, man, there's only so many of these jobs that you could possibly take if you're an up-and-coming coach. Like, you're not going to take Oklahoma State for $2.5 million more than Florida State. It's not going to happen, right? You're not going to Blacksburg for $3 million more than you're going to Tallahassee. You can use your leverage here on some of this stuff. Like, Florida State's won national titles and conference championships in the lifetime of these recruits. And I do think, like, I would just say, hey, all right, let's say it's Golesh or something like that, right? Hey, go take a look over there at Jeff Traylor at UTSA. Okay, was rumored for a bunch of jobs, didn't take them. Thought he was going to wait for the perfect one. They just lost to Temple.
Yep.
They just got dog walked by North Texas. Okay, your window to win in the G5, it is a gnat's ass, man. And you know what? If you miss time your window, you are screwed, and you'll never get the big payday. So maybe you're not making 12 or 10. Maybe you're making 6.5 with a nice salary pool for your assistants. Obviously, a large support staff that they've been funding. And you know what? It's a school that's clearly willing to pay for success. Maybe you load that thing up with more incentives. Some schools are going to do this. I guarantee it. There's no reason Florida State can't be one of those schools. And honestly, they're probably like optimally suited to do so right now. You can go to a guy, hey, you think you can win in Tallahassee with more resources than almost all your schedule? Think you can last here for like a decade? That's pretty cool to be able to raise your family one spot for a decade, you know?
Absolutely.
Think you're going to last that long in Oklahoma State or Blacksburg? Good luck. Think Arkansas is more than a one contract job?
No.
Right. So use your leverage. To me, it's like, look, there's some coaches who would be like an obvious bad choice, but if you're doing the search correctly, it's so hard to pick this, like, the perfect guy, man. It's like, all right, like, hire somebody who's qualified, and we can go over the qualifications for it. And don't overextend yourself. Stay nimble. NFL teams don't do this. Baseball teams NBA teams don't do this. Like, there's nobody like, hey, we can't fire this coach in the NFL because his buyout's too big. It's just not heard of. Right? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Do you think that ultimately does shrink the pool that FSU is going to look at? Because it's probably already a pipe dream to try to pull a sitting P2 head coach. And if you're going to use this business model of trying to go a shorter term and less guaranteed money, for lack of a better term, you're probably not going to go get a Lane Kiffin with that type of deal, right? Unless Lane just desperately wants to be in the state of Florida, being able to recruit that type of athlete on the regular. It probably does limit your candidate pool, but that doesn't have to be a bad thing either.
Look, I totally agree with you. And like, Lane Kiffin might be an awesome hire for the Gators. He might be an awesome hire for you. I don't think what you have to pay to pull him from Ole Miss makes sense as far as the amount of risk that you're taking on. That's not great business to do that. You know, it's not, in my opinion. I think there are some P2 coaches you could pull if you wanted. I think the probably key word there is if you wanted. You know, like, could you go get a PJ Fleck? I don't know if like you even like that idea, but I mean, it's pretty well known that he's looked to get out of there a couple times and has flirted with some other jobs. And Minnesota is certainly a hard place to win. And you have a lot more money than Minnesota and a lot better area and an easier schedule for sure. So like, a guy like that, potentially, I'm not throwing that out there as a name, just like that's kind of where I think you'd be. You know, you're not going to go get, like, Heupel's not going to leave Tennessee. I don't really think you want Beamer at this point for South Carolina. Like, guys like that, like, you're probably not going to go get. Drinkwitz would probably be like the real interesting one there. Like, but you'd have to pay up for him. Like, that wouldn't be a real like smart move as far as contract goes to do so. I think he'd actually would do well. But again, it's almost impossible to know. Like, show me who has a great track record of hiring head coaches with a meaningful sample set.
Outside of like the obvious candidates, like an Ohio State, there aren't a whole lot of them, right? Like Ohio State, and that maybe say more about Ohio State's program, that they're recession proof, that 50 consecutive years of just being what they are, that's not really the coach. It's just the resources they have and commitment to it.
Exactly. So, I mean, all right, let's think about here things that you want to see in a new head coach.
Let me ask you first, would you want one from a program that what we traditionally look at as the elites, right? The blue chip programs, those 18 that we have identified that when they operate at the right efficiency, they can legitimately compete for a national title? Do you want one from there, given they will understand how the game is played on the trail? They will understand how important it is that you live and breathe talent acquisition. It's not just something we do when we don't have to coach. It's something we have to do in order to succeed.
I would say that is not super important to me, but I think like I would like the guy to have some experience at either one of those programs or a program that actually like is legitimately kind of within that realm. I if you look at it, there are more than just 18 programs who are trying to recruit at that level now. Even if they don't, like they've recruited against a lot of those programs. I mean, we're looking at a situation now where like Vanderbilt and Indiana are somewhat likely to make a playoff run. So yeah, I think you would like the guy to have at least worked at one of the top half programs in the P4, like programs where like it's not just the goal is not just make a bowl, right? Like we're actually trying to go big game hunting here. But what I didn't say was that he needs to be an active head coach at one of those programs, right? And there are a couple G5 guys you could look at. I mean, look, John Summerall has won at Troy, has won at Tulane, but prior, he was like the best coach on Mark Stoops' staff by far, a gangster of a recruiter, really good defensive coach, and was also at Ole Miss before that, and was a pretty good recruiter over there. Alice Golesh, USF's head coach, he was like the best play caller Josh Heupel's had. He was the guy calling the shots when Tennessee was killing it there for a little bit. Prior to that, he was with Matt Campbell at Iowa State.
He also has exposure at Ohio State. He was on student
and Oklahoma State too, right? Like, if it's a guy who's just a completely native G5 guy, I would say that's probably not great.
I think like if you look at Norvell's box on Wiki, I think when you look at that, that's kind of where you're looking for those names. When you only see Tulsa and Arizona State and a Memphis on it, that I think in hindsight, that should have set off some alarm bells that why we saw some of the clown stuff that happened to him on signing days. I just don't think I think not having the exposure to how the big boys play the game in the recruiting aspect came back to haunt him. There was just a naivety there that he just didn't understand how it was really played. And he also didn't have the same demand on his assistants that he might have better understood had he spent some time at a Texas or a Texas A&M or a Miami or a Florida State or something like that, where you just understand when you're working under a Jimbo, you have extra time, make a call to this kid, stay on him, build the relationship. It may not pay off this one, but it could pay off on the next one.
It also like you can't. I don't think you can get addicted to like the just go buy the kid thing, right? And when you're one of the first schools that has a really successful collective, I wonder if that breeds complacency from a staff.
Certainly possible.
Right? I mean, look, Graham started he was one of the first collectives in the country. That's first mover advantage. He was very smart on that. I hear this from coaches all the time. Our head coach is like, "Hey, we'll just go buy the kid." Like, man, that's a bad way to do it.
Your money doesn't go as far. Like I tried to illustrate that recently for people that you might have a $15 million budget and it's really $16 million to get the 25 kids you want. But when you have to pay a 30% premium, it's going to cost you like $19 million to sign those kids. That's the disadvantage FSU's playing with right now, that every dollar doesn't go as far as it could if you were more committed and had better relationships and also had proof of concept. That's eventually going to have to, it's hard to do when you're coming in as a new coach, but that has to be a focus of the next staff. You get these kids in and actually have something to sell outside of just, I'm going to portal over him because he's not ready in year 2. Like, you have to play these kids and take some lumps here and there just so you have that on the trail to be able to point to and like, see, I turned that kid in from a 3-star and now he's looking at the NFL future, right? That's what Jimbo was so good at. He had those Xavier Rhodes and Terrence Brooks, these fringe 4s and more often than not a composite 3 that he then turned into an NFL prospect, and he could then go to a 4 or 5-star and be like, this is what I can do for you because look at the raw skills you have and you're already ahead of that one.
And I think that's important too to note because the ratings now are way better than they used to be. and they're only getting better every year as we get more verified data in the industry. Like, I mean, who knows? Like, maybe Xavier Rhodes goes to a real camp if he's a player nowadays, and then he's not a 3-star, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have verified data, you have verified measurements on the kid, and he's probably like a top 250 type kid. You know, he's raw, but like, you know, the measurables were certainly there. Now everybody has the same info for the most part. Like, occasionally, I mean, guys still slip through the cracks, but usually they're like guys who grow late. Maybe the dude was hurt in high school, whatever. So, like, the actual recruiting matters, I think, a lot. The evaluation stuff matters for fit and for budgeting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, you have to figure out which 3-stars you can purchase or acquire that fit what you do. All right, so yeah, like, I would like to have some experience, if possible, at one of the, like, you know, like a top half program in the P4. I think it's good if you've worked for more than one head coach, ultimately, because you see things that are done differently. You know, Norvell was very much in the same family with it. Doesn't look, and I don't think the process on hiring Norvell was bad, by the way. I want to make that clear. Like, I don't think that's a messed up process. The guy literally took Memphis to the Cotton Bowl and didn't do it on the back of like some NFL quarterback, which is another thing I think. Like, I would be very cautious of hiring a guy who has like an NFL QB at the G5 level and just rode that kid.
Well, on that point, though, would you say that it could have been maybe a yellow flag that he didn't actually build Memphis, instead he inherited it from Justin Fuente, who got a P4? So I think that's where Summerall's probably. Yes, he took over for Willie Fritz at Tulane, but what he did at Tulane or at Troy was his. That's an example of him being a program builder and then a sustainer at Tulane, right? Like, being able to keep what Willie Fritz had put in place once he left for Houston. So I think you probably want to look for that, where Norvell didn't totally have that on his side, because he did take over a more stable program from Fuente when he left for Vatek.
Specifically on Summerall, and look, I think you're going to have to fight Auburn tooth and nail to get Summerall, and obviously if Lane goes to Florida, you're going to have to fight Ole Miss too, I think. He's very much like, and I know John, so I'm trying to figure out, he's like toughness, but smart at it. Like,
so he's like Mark, so he got that probably from Mark, right? Because he worked under Stoops.
Probably, yeah. But like, those teams are physical. They don't beat themselves very much. But like, he doesn't do this like Will Muschamp, defensive coordinator masquerading the head coach crap. Like, he wants to score some points. You know, like he doesn't do this like ridiculous punting on the opponent 40 and all that kind of stuff. He likes analytics, which, I mean, that's not like a qualification for the job, but I do think you need to like not make egregious errors in game management. Like that would just like, why would you just kneecap yourself like that? Which, you know, some guys still do, and increasingly they get fired for it. Okay. I don't think you have to have head coaching experience, but I think if you don't, it better be like a real special coordinator candidate.
So you got to find the next Dan Lanning, right? Because Lanning didn't have. So maybe a Brian Hartline at Ohio State.
Sure. And he's not like, he's kind of a coordinator, but it's still kind of Ryan's offense. And
which Dan, it was still Kirby's defense with Dan. So that's kind of why I throw it out there. It's a similar, on the opposite side of the ball, but it's a very similar situation.
Where else has Brian been?
He's been under Urban. He played for Tressel. He was on Urban's staff in 17 and 18, and then he stayed on with Day. He's never actually been on another college staff, so that would certainly be a concern. But he has worked for 2 head coaches and played for a third. So I think he's seen how it, because Urban and Day, by all accounts, are very different in how they run a program. So he has seen the 2 extremes, right? Like, Urban was all about talent acquisition, and if the development came, that was a byproduct. But I think Day emphasizes development more, and he's okay if they don't have the number 1 or 2 class. A number 5 class is going to be okay, because they will fit our scheme and we will develop them. It's plastered all over Columbus. Developed here. OSU lives by that under Day. That wasn't so much the motto under Urban.
That makes sense. Okay. Again, like, sure, makes sense to me. I think that's largely fine. Just, you know, don't commit $60 million to the guy.
Right.
You know, hey, here's 6 or 7, right? It's double, triple what you're making now. Here's a nice salary pool for the assistants. Here's real incentives. Like, if you go to the college football playoff, incentives are aligned. Look, we're an incentive-based revenue program. If we kill it, The ACC gives us a lot more. Okay.
Would you incentivize beating your rivals? Is that in anybody's contract? It matters to this fan base. That's one of the reasons I bring it up. And I think it's important to the recruiting. It's important to the recruiting too. Like being able to be state champs matters in this state.
Yeah. It's also like you don't have as many good games on an annual basis. Like, and I mean good games that the fans care about. You do have some good ACC games that the fans just don't care.
Right.
Like it's just not one of those because you don't see the other fans in this league. Like you don't go to work and you're not running it like a Virginia fan or an NC State fan at your job in Tampa. It just doesn't happen. But you'll see Florida fans, you'll see Miami fans. You know, Clemson's so good that that's a real rivalry. You know, I would say Georgia Tech, but you just don't ever get to play them. So, you know, like that's probably your number 4. Sure, like that could make some sense. I think I would just align the incentives honestly with what the ACC gives you. And if you don't beat your rivals, you're probably not going to the playoff because I don't know how else your lineup of wins really stacks up. There's not many guys you could throw at me where I'm like, no, definitely not. Especially not at the right price, man. Like I don't think it's that hard to win in Tallahassee with the resources that you have now, which the new guy's going to have more than Mike did, and it's way more than Willie did. I mean, like, you know, Willie screwed up a lot of stuff for himself. He also had like a literal accountant as the AD for a while, and that was I don't think Urban Meyer was going to win in Tallahassee with that setup, or Nick Saban. I don't in hindsight. Now they wouldn't have done quite as bad because Willie screwed up again, plenty of stuff on his own. Yeah, in a weird way, I'm not that worried about this as long as like the right people get to make the hire, which I think is probably like, let's have a couple different voices in the room, you know, people who are committed to being at Florida State in the long term, like people with real Florida State connections there. But it's hard to hire a coach. Like think about how many guys made a ton of sense. The process was sound. It just didn't work out. I think the only real mistake you make is hiring somebody who's totally unqualified, or again, committing to them that you can't get out of it. You just got to stay nimble. And if it goes well, incentive-based, hardcore. I also mean like, hey, here's a 4-year extension incentive. Like, hey, here's more money now.
As your PJ Fleck example, I think that would be a bad hire on FSU's part for the simple fact that his exposure to the Southeast could be a concern. I do think there's a fit, right? Like Brian Kelly doesn't fit at LSU.
Right.
And I don't think a PJ Fleck fits down at Florida State because it's just a whole different region. There's a different, you know, value system. There's different kids that you've probably never really recruited or talked to, and you don't have relationships in those schools. So I do think that's a key area they need to look at when they do this search, is to make sure there's that right fit culturally, that they're not walking into an area they've never stepped foot in a high school in, because that puts yourself behind the 8 ball from the start. Right. And I think that's going to be very important, that you get somebody who understands the area and they understand the culture down here about football first and talent acquisition and all those other things that are just so important, the little things that build up the program. I think that's where Jimbo was so good. He was from the area. He knew it. He coached in all these states and had relationships existing in all these states. So I think that's important. Funny enough, Heartline is a big recruiter in the Southeast for OSU. So if that were a potential option, those things do exist from his standpoint. He's signed kids out of like 15 different states, and a lot of them, Georgia, Florida, you know, Texas, places that you have to be a presence in to build the right type of roster to compete at the highest level.
Totally. I just like looking. I agree with you on that. And now I don't know that Fleck would be a terrible fit at the right price, because they do recruit the state of Florida some, you know, and I think he's a guy who cares about recruiting. I don't think Minnesota has any like Minnesota's not paying high school kids,
right?
At least not like seriously. Florida State does, right? Like they do. They know how to do it. I guarantee you. You look at like some of these salaries. You don't need to pay a guy 10, man. And again, like come back to the money, but just remain nimble. That's like the only thing really, unless they just totally screw this up and hire somebody that just like doesn't make any sense and is totally unqualified.
Would you, with incentives, allow a salary to start touching that? Like you win a national championship, we'll give you a $2.5 million bonus type of thing, or you make the Final Four and it could be worth 7 figures type of bonus,
as long
right?
as you don't do it the way they did, like the Kentucky did with Stoops, to where you're marrying the guy long term for a good year. Like reward a good year with more money in that year or in the next year. Like not like, hey, it triggers a 6-year extension type thing.
Yeah.
Although if you win a national title, maybe that's like that's pretty rare, honestly. Like,
yeah, I mean, there's only 3 head coaches, right, that have one.
like how many coaches who won a national title do you think the school would regret giving a 4-year extension to? A couple.
Gene Chizik at Auburn.
Ed Orgeron. Certainly they regretted extending Jimbo, beyond the current deal he was on when he won his.
But it's few and far between. Typically, if a guy wins you a title.
Even if you gave any coach an automatic 10-year extension. So how many teams are actually happy with their head coach 10 years after winning their last national title?
Not a lot.
That's
right?
what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Bama take down the biggest prize, man.
Yeah, Bama's like the exception. Tressel at OSU, they were still happy with him at the end, like almost 10 years later. But like, it's very rare. Like the game tends to pass those guys by too.
So if we know that, why are we pretending that we are any better than the best in the industry at this?
That's a good question.
Like that doesn't make any sense, right? I'm just looking here at like the list of the national title winning teams, right? Football. All right. Yeah. Could we go year by year?
I got a list if you want me to rattle some off.
Okay, got it here. All right. So let's go back to teams that have won a decade ago. So we're starting in 2016.
Alabama, Clemson, LSU, OSU, Georgia.
You think Clemson's still going to be happy with Dabo in 2028?
No, they're not happy with him today.
You think LSU would be happy if they still had to have Ed Orgeron in 2029?
Absolutely not.
Right. Okay. How about Scott Frost? Jesus, that's not a real thing. All right. Would Ohio State have been happy to have Urban Meyer still in 2024?
If he was 10-0 against Michigan, yes. That's the thing. He was 7-0 when he left, so yeah, they probably would have.
That's fair.
But of course, OSU again is always the exception to the rule. It's hard to use them as some type of standard that you measure yourself against.
I mean, okay, so Gene Chizik, obviously, they fired him like 2 years after winning the title.
Yep.
Who else here? Les Miles.
There you go.
2017? Hell no. They were done with him. Mac Brown in 2005 seems awesome, on top of the world. By 2015, they were done.
Yeah.
Like that's Pete Carroll, Bob Stoops. Those actually worked out. And
well, it remains to be seen, but maybe Georgia will be happy with Kirby come 2031, but maybe his window has already shut. Who knows? Like, they don't seem like the same beasts they were in 21 and 22, right?
Right. So, I mean, this is my point. Like, no, I just don't think you need to operate on such long-term deals. And it's okay to say no. And you could say, like, oh, the agents control the market. Man, like, the agent still has to take the offer to the client. And I guarantee you, I mean, if you look at what jobs are open right now. Okay. Just be in the ACC and where you're at as far as your leverage on the facilities and everything else, I would say you're behind Florida and Penn State for the hiring cycle.
Yeah. And
nobody else at this point. All right. Now Auburn's doing weird stuff as far as like the lip service on some of their NIL. And remember, like, they wouldn't issue like contracts to guys until later. And, some of this kind of the same stuff Alford's done as far as like Alford being a true believer that all you need, like, everybody's going to follow this salary cap stuff, which is ridiculous. I just don't think anybody's like, yeah, we're going to go ahead and take Virginia Tech over Florida State because they're offering 3 more years. If you want to, cool. Tells me you don't believe in yourself as much. All right. Great. Like, there's a lot more than 30 good football coaches out there in the country, guys. And I think the hubris that it takes to say we can definitely sniff out who the perfect one is, who's guaranteed to succeed even in the face of a mountain of evidence is wild. So, like, stop relying on your overconfidence to your detriment in terms of making these contract decisions. I don't know.
Are there anything else you would look for in the search? Like, you would hope that this box gets checked, or this would give you some pause?
I would say if you like, okay, let's take James Franklin. If you don't get Franklin at like a massive discount, that would probably annoy me, you know, because obviously he's a guy that has real like money coming to him from Penn State, and which, by the way, Mike does too. Mike's contract does have an offset.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I don't think it's a full offset, but I mean, if Mike wants a job, Mike will get a job. Like the guy has an undefeated season in a power conference. He obviously did really well at Memphis. Anything else I would look for? Yeah. Okay. One thing, one of the reasons why I do think I like Drinkwitz is that he seems to embrace like cutting edge stuff. Like he was really in part behind Missouri being one of the first NIL adopters. Being heavy in the portal at a program like Missouri, you're not just going to like high school your way to an SEC title at Missouri. It's not going to happen. So you have to think out of the box. He also has lost coordinators to promotions on both sides of the ball and has probably upgraded on both.
That's a great. That's great. Who they hire is almost as important as the actual hire.
Right. I like to see guys who have won, like with at least like have had 3 coordinators total, man. Like don't just have the exact same guys and who didn't necessarily have like an awesome quarterback as the main reason they won. Like that's kind of one of the reasons I like Summerall, because he has the experience there at Kentucky under Mark, right? His quarterback play at Troy was absolute garbage, and they still found ways to. I mean, that was. And then last year he had a stud, and this year he doesn't.
Right.
And yet they're still potentially going to make the playoff, and one of the very few favorites to make the playoff there at the G5 level.
Would you prefer offense or defensive side of the ball? Do you think it matters?
Okay, just blindly offense, because I think more errors are made by like the very like stooge defensive coordinator types. But there are certain guys like Manny Diaz, right? I don't think they'll do it. I think Manny would kill it in Tallahassee.
Yeah.
But
I think he's going to wind up at Penn State, to be totally honest. I think Rule's going to say no, and Manny's going to Happy Valley.
Also, like, I mean, Rule's losing some ball games here, man.
Yeah.
Like, they got destroyed by Minnesota. He's a defensive coach who has embraced offense. And I do think that's important. Like, in who you hire, the system that you allow them to run. And like the Muschamp stuff is like real red flags.
And Lanning does that stuff in Eugene as well.
Correct.
Like he lets Stein be on the front edge of all that stuff.
Like think about the defensive coaches who have won national titles in recent years. Kirby, I mean, Jeff Monken was an excellent hire. They weren't like super up tempo or super wide open, but I mean, they also had just such a defense there.
Yeah.
Nick Saban hired Sark and Lane Kiffin as coordinators. Like he embraced offense. Bob Stoops hired Mike Leach as his coordinator when they beat FSU, right? To win their national title under Bob. There's got to be others here. Obviously, like Ed Orgeron, defensive guy.
Yep. Wide open offense for Joe Brady.
Yeah, right. Who else here? Harbaugh's an offensive guy. I mean, obviously.
Funny enough, because he seems much more like a defensive guy. If you wanted to like characterize him as one.
Exactly. Jimbo's an offensive guy, which, but I do not think they should hire Jimbo Fisher. Like, to me, he has not been a good coach in about a decade. I think you can do better, personally. Now, if you wanted to work for like $1 million or something like that, which I don't think that's almost insulting at that point. You don't need to pay you don't need to try to get away with paying the guy $3 million, but like you don't need to pay 9, 10, 11, 12. That's just not necessary. I don't think. Doesn't make him a better coach to pay him that much more. So I don't think when the agent takes their offer to the guy, even if he's like, man, this is like kind of below market for some ways. If his location is not below market, their facilities are not below market, their NIL budget and rev share is not below market, their ability to win and like actually win consistently due to the schedule is not below market, right? The payout relative to the conference is certainly not below market.
Right.
So the agent can't just tell you no, not take it to the client. Like he's under an obligation to take it to the client if it's a reasonable offer. So, but yeah, I think hiring makes some sense for sure. Like any guy who has a track record of hiring well, that's solid. Again, like Summerall has hired guys who've been hired away by major programs. One of his DCs now is is at Tulane, and the other one is at Texas Tech.
Okay.
So offensively, not as much, but like they do score some points. Like Tulane is not winning games 13-10.
No.
Yeah, like Go Lesh. I think Go Lesh makes a lot of sense, man. They recruit high school in the state. He's obviously worked in the P5 like Tennessee's a team that cares. They're trying to win.
And they run the same beer. He's running the veer and shoot that Heupel ran, right? The same exact. Like there's no real
variation. They all do more formation stuff now, but yeah.
Okay. And I think people confuse that. They think that's some type of pass happy offense. That's actually they need to be able to run the football for that offense to do what they really want to do. That is a physical run game when it's working right. I mean, you watch them right now. They run the ball. When they had their success a couple of years ago, they ran the football. I think that's always important. I think like people fall in love with the throwing the ball around, but you got to be able to run the football and be physical in the trenches, and that offense does embrace that. So
completely. You also need to have a good front office. And I think you need to have a head coach who understands his limitations. One of Napier's limitations is that he thought he was a good play caller and a good designer of offense. And basically all the evidence says that's not the case. I think Mike thinks he's a really good evaluator of talent and maybe a good negotiator in some cases. And I don't think that's true. At least not. I'm not saying he's bad. He's probably better than me and you. I don't think he's better than like the market average of guys in that position, and like let some people do their jobs at times. I think is important. That's harder to ascertain, but there are plenty of good guys out there. I think for a GM title, if you decide to make a change there as well, which the head coach is probably going to bring in the GM. We don't know how FSU will run that model, but I do think that the people in that office, I'm not just like talking Derek here, right? But like, I think some schools have better quality people who they've hired like underneath Derek, ultimately, overall, and that could use some fresh blood in that office, like for sure.
Right.
Maybe not an entire cleaning of the house. Don't want to baby with the bathwater here, but yeah, that's pretty much all I got, man. I might see you in like 14 hours.
Yeah, I mean, last night was good closure. I never enjoy a loss, but there was something about last night that just there was a finality to it, and I'm ready for the next page. Let's go on to the next chapter and get FSU back to just being functional would be good. It's just been a real long decade of not operating even at an average pace. If we could just at least get the floor back to 8-4 with 9-3 or 10-2, and more often than not, I'd be okay with that until they can get into a P2 conference and get on level footing. That way you can get back to recruiting legitimately a top 7 or 8 class in the country on the regular, and you have the same amount of money to play with, because FSU's always played at a disadvantage. They've always had to do more with less.
Right. Exactly.
And so, I think the first step is to get the program healthy. The next step is to get into a P2, and then you can maybe unlock the true potential of what this program should be in this modern day of football.
Completely. I'm there with you on that. All right, man. Let's chop it here, and we will probably get back on tomorrow or the next day, or who knows? Maybe we have a bunch of these coming. I don't know. But as of 9:29, not officially fired. So we'll chop it here.
All right. Go Noles.